Okay, let's do it. What is happening, Booth Junkies? Mike Delgadio here, back with another video on home studio setup for voiceover. Yes! We have a guest microphone in the booth today, provided to me by the generosity of you, my subscribers. I am so grateful for the unbelievable generosity of you guys and your willingness to send microphones to me. I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for it. This microphone comes to us from a fellow booth junkie, Jake. Thank you so much for this microphone. This microphone has been a real surprise for me. I just can't say enough. I'm really, really grateful to your generosity to send it to me. What microphone is it, Mike, that you're waxing rhapsodic about? This is the SE Electronics T2 multi-pattern condenser microphone. And for a point of comparison, we'll put it next to my CAD e100s microphone. Longtime viewers of my channel know that I love this microphone. I talk it up all the time. And I thought, just by looking at these two, looking at the specifications on paper and the price point, it would be a good one to put side by side. A lot of people ask me about this microphone, so I thought I'd put it up against this one and just give you guys a chance to see, because I think you're going to find these are two very similar microphones, but this one has a different, expanded feature set that maybe makes it right for you. So if you've hemmed and hawed about the CAD e100s because it's lacking some feature that you need, perhaps the SET2 is just the one for you. So let's take a look, shall we? Okay. For a point of context, let's talk about the CAD e100s and just go through its features real quick, and then we'll go a little bit more broadly and deeply into the T2. So the CAD e100s is a super cardioid condenser microphone with two switches on the front, a high-pass filter and a attenuation switch, also called a padding switch that reduces the sensitivity of the microphone. And this one is very commonly used for voiceover. Lots of voice artists use it because it sounds great. Hopefully you think it sounds great. And it's really versatile. It's non-intrusive. It's the super cardioid pattern, makes it really focused for voice. It's really aces. Now, on the other hand, the T2 has a number of features that may make it more versatile. So if you're going to be doing things more than voiceover, perhaps you're also going to be using it for music production, maybe this has some features that you would like. Let's talk about them. First, price. These are two identically priced microphones. Fairly pricey microphones. You're starting to get up into not into the stratosphere, but up into the pricey professional grade microphones here. They are both, I checked today, $499 for each one of these microphones. $499, $499. Makes them, they're pricey. No doubt whatsoever. $499. Okay. They both have attenuation switches, and they both have high-pass filters. I said the CAD E100, let's talk about the high-pass filter first. The CAD has a single high-pass filter set at 80 hertz. What this means is that when you have this switch engaged, everything below 80 hertz gets blocked by the microphone, gets turned down, and everything above 80 hertz can come through. It actually tapers off. It's not like it's 79 hertz, you can't hear anything. It's just at 79 hertz, it's a little quieter. 78 hertz, 50 hertz is quieter. All right, so it tapers off. And the reason many manufacturers build that switch in is to address the proximity effect. The proximity effect is the tendency for a microphone to enhance the bass that's coming from the source as the source gets closer. So as I start to get closer and closer to these microphones, not only does the sound get richer and louder, but it tends to get bassier. You just hear more bass in the source, which sometimes as a voice actor we want that, sometimes we don't. Sometimes when you're miking an instrument, you definitely don't want it to get bassier because you want it to sound like the instrument and not like a bassy version of the instrument. So you may engage that switch to remove some of that bass, to attenuate it a bit. High-pass filter. The CAD's is a single switch set at 80 hertz, so when you engage it, everything below 80 hertz starts to get attenuated. The T2, on the other hand, has a two-position switch, or it's actually a three-position switch. There's neutral in the middle. Turn it to one side, and it's a 60 hertz high-pass filter, everything below 60 hertz gets attenuated, or a 120 hertz switch, that everything below 120 hertz is set at a bit more gentle curve. Two different ways to attenuate the bass for whatever your purposes might be. There's also a pad switch on both of these microphones. A pad switch means that you reduce the overall sensitivity of the mic. So as you're talking into the mic, if you have the pad switch engaged, it's going to be quieter as it makes it to disc. Similar to if you turn the gain down on your preamp, you're attenuating it here in the microphone. The CAD has a single pad switch that takes 10 decibels away. So when you switch that switch over, it reduces the overall signal by 10 dB. Allows you to put it next to a snare drum or up against an amplifier cabinet, something like that, so that if it's super loud, you can reduce the sensitivity of the microphone so you can put it in front of a louder source before the circuitry overloads. Now, the T2 has two switches. It's actually a 3-position switch. In the middle, it's not attenuated. You turn it to one direction, it takes away 10 dB, and you switch it to the other end, and it's 20 dB. Now, that might make you think that the T2 can actually handle a louder source, but according to the specification sheet, the E100 actually can go in front of a louder source. When you have the 10 dB pad engaged, you can go to in front of a 150 decibel source before it overloads. With the minus 20 dB pad engaged on the T2, it can go to 142. So still in front of an incredibly loud source, but this one, it can be a bit louder. This one, when there's no switch engaged, the max is 122 dB. So when we look at the frequency response graph, you actually start to see why I was surprised that these two microphones sound so similar. The first is that I have these both set on the most similar pattern. So this is the super cardioid pattern. This is the hypercardioid pattern, which means, I talked about the pattern. So the pattern means that there's a sensitive part of the microphone where it's sensitive to. The super cardioid pattern takes the cardioid pattern, which is a lobe of sensitivity in front of the microphone, everything on this side of the microphone, it hears, and it squeezes that pattern in just a little bit, makes it a little bit less sensitive from the side in exchange for a little tiny area of sensitivity just behind the microphone, a little tiny lobe of sensitivity behind it. The hypercardioid pattern takes that supercardioid and squeezes it just a little tiny bit more in exchange for a slightly larger lobe of sensitivity in the back. The next one is the figure 8, which is even smaller in the front and even bigger in the back. Right. But if you look, and so at each different squeezing of that pattern, the frequency response changes a little bit. The tone of the microphone will change just a little tiny bit. If you look at the graph for this one, it shows that it should be not less clear. That's not the right word. This one should have a presence boost. It should be slightly brighter above like 3,000, 4,000 hertz, 3 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz. There's a presence boost in this pattern. Whereas in the hypercardioid pattern, it's practically flat, even if a bit attenuated until like 10,000 hertz. So this one shouldn't sound as bright as this one. And yet, when I listen on my headphones, I find that the difference between them is not nearly as pronounced as I would expect. There probably is the slightest difference, and some of you with really excellent ears will be like, oh, there's a world of difference. But for me, as I listened to it, and I did an A/B blind test, I switched back and forth, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell when it was switching. It was not obvious to me as I switched back and forth. Take that as what I mean. So it tells me that this is a nice, clear microphone. It doesn't need that presence boost. Where, it's just the way the manufacturer has chosen it. A presence boost is not at all unusual to have an elevation, an enhancement of the frequencies above 3,000 or 4,000 hertz. It's not unusual in a microphone. It's just that at the hypercardioid pattern, I expected that presence boost to be there, and it's not. And yet, these two microphones sound extremely, extremely similar to my ears. So what that means is at the same price point, if you were looking at the CAD e100s, but we're saying, I need that figure 8 because I want to buy 2 because I want to do a mid-side stereo recording. Perhaps the T2 is the microphone that you're looking for. If you say, there's 2 of us and I want to have that figure 8 pattern, or I need to have Omni because every once in a while there's going to be more than one of us, or I want to use this as a room mic or something like that, the T2 might end up being the microphone that you want if you were thinking about the E100S but were put off because it didn't have some of those features. Okay, and then the next 2 switches, there are 2 switches that work in concert, and these switches are not present on the E100S. There are 2 switches that allow you to select the pattern. And it's implemented in kind of a weird way, to be honest. I guess it doesn't really matter because it's a set and forget, but you have to work 2 different switches in concert with each other to get to the right pattern that you want. So on the right 2 most switches, the left one of the right 2 most switches is a 3-position switch. There is an Omni direction on the far left, and there is the figure 8 pattern on the far right. But in the middle, then has a diagram that takes you over to switching between the 2 different cardioids. So when the left one of the rightmost switches is in the middle, it then toggles you over to the other switch where you can choose between cardioid or hypercardioid. Interesting, right? So I've never seen that. Normally it's like you just go click, 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 and you just choose between a rainbow of the different patterns in order: Omni, wide or cardioid, super or hypercardioid, and figure 8. You normally just switch, right between all of those. This one having that 2 different switches, it's just the way they've elected to implement it. I'm not sure why, but that's what it is. So you do have to look at the way you've got 2 different switches toggled in order to get the different cardioid style patterns. The 2 have a very similar look about them. So they're both this squarish shape, very narrow, which means they can get close to a cabinet. They can get close to a source. They're not a round microphone. It's just that the basket is closer, which means that, and it's probably happened throughout this video, and I'm so sorry about it, but because I don't have a pop filter in front of these, the baskets on these, one is very close to the diaphragm, and also I can see right through these baskets, right through them. So the baskets themselves are there to protect the diaphragm, but not to attenuate. They're not built-in pop filters. You will definitely need to put a pop filter in front of it, unless you've just got extraordinary technique. But it does allow it. That low profile allows you to get right up next to like a speaker cone or right up next to an instrument or something like that. So they do have a low profile nature to them. I will say that they have this different shock mount. So these are both in their shock mounts. The SE's shock mount is, man, it is robust. This thing is heavy duty metal. It's, I don't know, steel or whatever it is, but it's a very robust shock mount. Still reasonably low profile. You can get really close to the source. I think the CAD e100S for voice actors, this has got one of the best, usability-wise, got one of the best shock mounts in the business because it's built essentially right into the microphone. So we're not, as voice actors, we don't handle these microphones. We shouldn't have our hands all over them. So having this low profile means you can get right up on that microphone. It means it can be really close to a source. It means it doesn't get in your way. It allows a pop filter to be right up close to it. But the SE's is pretty close. It's not a big circle. It's not a big cage that sits around it. It's a nice one. It's a nice one. And it's super robust, sturdy. So that's what you have to. So now you've heard it. You've heard the different features. I'd love to hear in the comments from those of you with better ears than me what you think the difference is between the sound of these microphones. It's subtle. It's subtle, which means I really like the way this T2 sounds because I really like the way the E100S sounds. If this one is slightly less bright, I'd buy it. If you hear that this one is slightly less bright, I'd buy it just because the numbers say it should be so. But for me, it was really quite subtle. There you go. The SET2. Jake, thank you, man. Thank you for your generosity. Let me use this mic. You'll have it back real soon. For the rest of you, I hope that helps. Does it help? I hope it helps. Hope it helps you make a choice. That's all I'm trying to do. Help you make a choice. So now, go get yourself a microphone, any microphone. Maybe it's a multi-pattern, maybe it's a single pattern. Get yourself a microphone. get in a booth, get out there and record something amazing. Thanks. We'll talk to you next time.